And looking back at it, it's frustrating. Like, I want to go back to these neurologists that wanted to remove part of my brain and tell them, y'all might want to reconsider your protocol. Look at my situation here. I was literally healed from an incurable illness. Epilepsy's completely gone. The brain damage has been resolved according to the last MRI radiologist report. And how do you explain that?
Hello, everyone. My name is Kendra Seymour. Welcome back to your Indoor Air podcast, brought to you by Change the Air Foundation. Now, I'm going to give you fair warning about today's interview. When I first met my guests, their story left me utterly speechless, for lack of a better way to describe it. It made me cry. It made me angry. And as you will learn, AJ and Becky Callegan had a family-owned and operated HVAC company with a wonderful reputation. But ultimately, it was AJ's exposure to mold and other microbial growth through his work and home that led him to suddenly developing various health symptoms, including seizures. His doctors were perplexed as to the root cause and were unable to effectively control his seizures through medications and other interventions. Ultimately, AJ was told by his neurologist that the next steps for his treatment would involve surgery to remove part of his brain. It was ultimately Becky and AJ's own perseverance and determination that led them to answers about the root cause of their health issues and ultimately their recovery. It is an unbelievable journey, and I hope you will not only listen, but share their story, because our industries need to do better. Our medical system needs to do better. Our government needs to do better at protecting people's health. Thank you so much, AJ and Becky, for being here today and sharing your story with us. Let's start with, you guys started experiencing some health symptoms. AJ, I know you had it the worst. Talk to us about when all of this started to change, when your health started to take a turn, and kind of how you went through your journey ultimately back to healing and health.
So do you want to start?
So we moved from, we're from New Orleans, Louisiana area. So we were born and raised in what most would call kind of like the bayou portion of the state, Lafitte, Louisiana. And then we moved north of New Orleans, about 40 miles north, to what the locals call the North Shore. So again, just kind of being raised in a swampy area. Now looking back on the journey, we know that AJ was exposed to mold probably very, very early on as a kid. And then our first resident as a married couple was a manufactured home, and most definitely had presence of mold in it. So we moved from the South Shore, New Orleans area to the North Shore in 2010 into the home that we do currently reside in. And AJ started with some abnormal health complications in probably late 2012 or early 2013. What we now know, he was experiencing seizures. That is kind of when the first one took place. We did not know then that it was actually a seizure. So fast forward from, again, that time, early 2013, all the way through 2016, saw some physicians, got some symptom diagnosis, and he did get on some prescription medications and did not experience, again, the seizures anymore. So he wasn't feeling great, but definitely didn't feel what we would call bad. AJ was also overweight at the time. So again, just kind of chucked everything up to that was the issue, that he was, a young man in his late 20s, early 30s who was overweight, and again, like heading to a path of destructive health. That led AJ to make the decision in late 2015. He decided he wanted to do some drastic health changes and decided to have weight loss surgery. That surgery was scheduled for January of 2016, and he did move forward with that decision. And again, at the time, it was okay. Like we were apprehensive, but again, felt hopeless. We were going to utilize it as a tool. It was going to change our whole family. We were going to start cooking better. We all were going to make progress to lose weight. Well, he had the surgery, and again, now that we can see everything from the backside of the journey, it was a bad decision. AJ's health rapidly declined after having that surgery, to the point that probably late 2016 into January of 2017, didn't really have any explanation or answers as to what was going on, thought that he was having like high blood sugar and or low blood sugar, kind of glycemic attacks. Again, what we now know as the seizures were becoming more frequently. In the past, he might only had that one in 2012, and then he didn't have any until after the surgery in 2016. The prescriptions stayed the same, everything. Was successful with the weight loss, all that kind of stuff. So we just kind of went like chased different medical diagnosis and talked to people at church, talked to friends, talked to family. I have a little bit of a medical background myself, and lots of nurses in my family. So just talking through everybody, we never really got any answers, and or what you would think would be the normal thing. The treatment was not, it didn't make the symptom go away. 2017, we were introduced to the idea that he could possibly be having seizures. But again, no neurologist would give us an accurate diagnosis. He had EEGs done. Nothing came back on EEGs. And all throughout this whole time, like, again, we own and operate a residential HVAC company. We're living in the house that we moved in. So AJ is being exposed to environmental toxins, but that is not on anyone's radar at all. Like, none of us have a knowledge that that could even potentially be a thing. So all of 2017, again, just saw many different neurologists from our state's capital, Baton Rouge, you know, our neighborhood, New Orleans, all of that thing. Probably went through about 5 or 6 different neurologists. No answers at all. Not a diagnosis of epilepsy or anything. Finally, in January of 2018, got a diagnosis of epilepsy. And at the time, it's like kind of a hopeful thing, like, oh, yay, we have a diagnosis. But again, just kind of intrinsically in us, it was constantly to question. And so 2 questions that we asked the neurologist early on, like, what caused this? And obviously how to get it to stop. AJ did not have any type of head injury. He didn't have any, you know, lesions or tumors on his brain. He was not born with epilepsy. So again, just we questioned, like, why did this start happening? And one physician went as far as to tell us, like, well, we actually won't be able to know that until, you know, AJ passes away and we can do an autopsy on his brain. So needless to say, we did not want to go that option to get an answer to the question. So we moved on and continued to question the next physician. So 2018, we get a diagnosis that it is epilepsy. AJ starts on anticonvulsant treatments via prescription medication. All through 2018, he probably tried a dozen to 16 different anti-seizure medications, you know, from brand new stuff on the market to the old original things that have been there for decades. And he just progressively got worse, got worse, got worse. The seizures changed in character, and also they became more frequent. So he went from, again, very early on, just 1 seizure in a year's time to maybe, you know, 2 seizures in a year, then maybe 1 every quarter, to now he was having them probably at this point multiple in a month. And as the year went on, it was multiple in a week. And as I'm sure we'll get to at the end of our journey, it was multiple a day, upwards of 8 seizures a day. And he had a total of 4 grand mal seizures. So again, at this time, there is no awareness at all of environmental illness, or that, you know, any of this could have been developed by any exposure to any type of toxin from the built environment. And so in 2019, AJ is working through all of this. Our business is, you know, family owned and operated. I work for the company, he works for the company, and it's our source of income. It's all we know. You know, I share with people that I was born and bred in the industry. My parents actually still own and operate a company in the New Orleans area. So it was really, really, really hard for us to step away and say, we're not going to do this anymore, because it was our family support. It was our sole source, and it was all we knew. That was our knowledge. So 2019, the first quarter, I came to the realization that, AJ can no longer do this, or he definitely can't do it the way that he used to. And, by the second quarter of the year, June of 2019, miraculously, as it will come out in our story, we are Christians, we're people of faith. So a movement by God, the people, the company, and the family owned and operated company that bought ours, they actually reached out to us to check on AJ. As you mentioned, he had a good reputation in the industry and in the community. So at this point, word had gotten out that he wasn't doing well. And so they reached out to check on us. And within 2 weeks, our business was sold. So June of 2019, we sold the business, and we embarked on a healing journey, and we stepped away from traditional Western medicine and went 100% functional medicine. And that was when, again, kind of still no like real, like, oh my gosh, this is mold, but it definitely began to open the doors to where we are today. So we saw a functional medicine doctor in our own area. Again, AJ got a little better, but wasn't 100%, still continuing to have seizures. This functional medicine doctor did not mention mold to us. He tested AJ, put AJ through a gambit of testing, gut health, endocrine system, neurological testing, of course. But for whatever reason, even with AJ's work history and obviously being exposed regularly, there was no communication about mold. So January of 2020, we actually went to that functional medicine physician, and AJ thought he might have had Lyme disease. This had come up before, but there was he might have had a test done from a traditional doctor. It came up negative. So again, just kind of close that door and move on. But AJ really felt heavily prompted that he needed to navigate the possibility of Lyme disease again and speak to someone on a functional medicine side. So we went to our doctor, asked him about that. And he, at the same time as well, AJ had found Dr. Neil Nathan, whom, we all know. He had found his literature online in his book. And again, though, it was just more of this doctor knows about Lyme disease. He knows how to treat Lyme holistically. There was some kind of back brain knowledge about mold, but surprisingly, we still never made the connection. So we talked to our functional medicine doctor about this Dr. Neil Nathan. We considered moving to California for AJ to receive treatment. There was another facility in Florida that we possibly entertained moving to, but we never really had a piece or a really heavily prompting that, yes, you need to pack up and you need to go today. But I'll just reiterate and express, we were in the fight of our lives. AJ was progressively getting worse every day. He took himself off of all seizure medications because they weren't helping. They were actually making him worse. He not only was experiencing multiple seizures a day on the seizure medication, then he was dealing with all of the side effects that come along with those medications. So he had taken himself off of all of that. And at this point, we are on a fully functional medicine journey and taking supplements and those types of things, but just saw very minimal progress. So in January of 2020, we had this conversation with the functional medicine doctor, and he tells us that he actually thinks that he also has Lyme disease. So surprisingly, he had a personal consult with Dr. Neil Nathan for himself. So he promised us that he would discuss AJ's case with Dr. Nathan, and he would find out if they could kind of collaborate together and we could stay home and our local doctor could treat AJ, or, kind of if we did need to relocate. So after that conversation and our follow-up visit, our functional medicine doctor told us, Dr. Nathan said, I don't know enough to be able to treat you functionally about Lyme disease. He said, you need to go see Dr. Joseph Mather in Metairie, Louisiana, because I've trained him. So that was kind of like a pivotal changing point of our journey. And really it was a godsend, not only financially, but again, for the knowledge that Dr. Joe, as we call him, had from being trained under Dr. Neil Nathan. So we go see Dr. Joe in either late January, February of 2020. And that very first visit, again, as most people know, like you have to fill out, it seems like 8,000 history papers beforehand and all that kind of stuff to prepare. So turn all that stuff in, go to our appointment, and literally almost the first words out of Dr. Joe's mouth is, based on your work history and based on where you've lived and where we currently live in South Louisiana, I want to test you for mold, because I don't even care about Lyme disease. If you have mold in your system and it goes unrecognized, if we don't acknowledge it and or treat it, you won't even survive Lyme treatment. So that was our first kind of explanation or introduction that this could be mold toxicity. And AJ did the testing, and needless to say, he was off the charts. So at the time, and probably to date, Dr. Joe will tell you that AJ was his most complicated patient and his most toxic patient.
So let's stop there then for a moment. And AJ, I'm curious, because this is over multiple years, talk to us about what was like going through your mind as you first started getting the seizures and then progressively getting worse, because I can't imagine the mental load that you carry. You're a father, you're a husband, you're trying to run your business, and now your body is essentially failing you and there are no answers.
That's it's a difficult thing to answer. Like going through it, I was there physically, but not mentally most of the time. One of the things that I still deal with is memory. Like I was obviously there throughout all these years, but that's why I leave it up to her to tell the story, because she has all the details that I don't have. But going through it obviously as hell, like I was completely incapacitated. I couldn't work, couldn't drive. How do you, as a man, you can't support your family? You can't do anything, So me being me, it's always my job to get to the bottom of things and get to the root cause of what's causing the issue. So I think that was my driving force. Let's figure out what the hell is actually causing this and not just treat symptoms. And it's frustrating because going through the whole medical industry ordeal, like one of the main questions I would always bring up to the doctors is how much not neurological, but nutritional training did y'all do? And they do very little, and it's frustrating. But just going through it, like it's hell. So the only way I could put it.
Yeah. So I alluded to this in the intro. You at one point, we're going to pick up with the doctor who finally turned things around for you, because I know people will want to hear about that. But at one point you shared with me that one of your neurologists, when they ran out of answers, ultimately suggested brain surgery to you. Tell us about that, if you don't mind, because that to me was just mind-blowing.
So after the 12 or 15 different epilepsy drugs that they threw at us, like the typical medical protocol, none of them worked. Like Becky said, they all made it worse. So at that point, like, I don't want nothing to do with it. Let's get off of it. Well, at that point, they re-diagnosed me with refractory epilepsy, which simply means you don't respond to the drug. You have to have brain surgery. So at that point, like, no, I'm not having brain surgery. You're treating a symptom. And we always raise the question, if I have this brain surgery, can you guarantee I won't have seizures anymore? And the answer is no, obviously. So we refuse to do it. I refuse to take that as a solution to a problem, because it's not a solution. It's a treatment to a symptom that could potentially be detrimental even further. And looking back at it, it's frustrating. Like I want to go back to these neurologists that wanted to remove part of my brain and tell them y'all might want to reconsider your protocol. Look at my situation here. I was literally healed from an incurable illness. Epilepsy's completely gone. The brain damage has been resolved according to the last MRI radiologist report. And how do you explain that? Like these neurologists, they're quick to sell a $60,000 surgery when you could be treated and healed from a simple organic protocol to detoxify the body and let the body do what God designed the body to do and heal itself.
Yeah. So then either of you, let's pick up with the doctor who kind of changed things for you and how you started putting those pieces together and then tied it to exposure. So you meet this doctor, he pinpoints mold, you're off the charts. What happens next?
So again, it was at the time, since AJ had already been under treatment with another functional medicine doctor. Again, while we appreciate every single physician that had a part of our journey, as I alluded to, or as I stated, like Dr. Joe was a godsend, because AJ was probably on about $2,500 a month in supplements. Again, all natural, all good things, but the list was
ridiculous,
probably 40 to 50 deep. And as most people know who have walked through these journeys, you got to take certain ones in the morning, certain ones after breakfast, certain ones with no food, certain ones at lunch, certain ones with dinner, then at bedtime. All of this, not only like expensive supplements, a lot of supplements, but then there's this whole rhetoric and routine that you have to follow. So just keeping up with that is a chore in and of itself. So Dr. Joe said, unless we can go through this list, he told AJ, unless you can go through this list of supplements with me and you can tell me how each and every one of them is helping you, I want you to stop them all. So out of that whole list, AJ was able to point out 2 of them that he felt like helped him. And Dr. Joe said, okay, well, we're going to stay on those 2 and we're going to get off the rest. And I'm going to transition you into a binder protocol and we're going to walk this thing out. So from day one, Dr. Joe said that he would probably be about an 18-month detox process. Again, when we embarked on this journey in 2019 seriously, but as I said, AJ really, his health significantly started to get worse in 2016. So we're in it about 4 years. We're exhausted. AJ's not working. I'm not working. We're literally fighting like for his life. We're in the trenches fighting this thing. Not to mention that COVID takes place during all of this time. So you deal with all of that. So we kind of said like, okay, Dr. Joe, like 18 months sounds good, but no, we want it to be a lot shorter. Like we're thinking like 6 to 12 months. Like we got some answers, like we're going to get this thing done. AJ was a very, very, very compliant patient. When
you're going through hell, like you do what you got to do. You do what the doctor says. And like Becky said, I was fully expecting to get back to work in 6 months, which obviously didn't happen.
Yeah. I'll again, and I know we'll get to it later, but one of the things that you had asked, one of the questions, kind of preparing for this, some things we would do different and or what's our advice to other people, like don't give up. Like you have to stay in the trenches. And I do also, like I'm transparent and I'm open and honest with people. And I do tell them that even after we had answers, like AJ did get better before he got worse. But the point is to not give up. Oh, right. I'm sorry. Yeah. Got better. Got worse before he got better. Even after the answers and after the detox started, he did get worse before we saw some actual turnaround. Again, that I know that that's not everybody's story, but I like to encourage people like, hey, no matter how hard it gets, like, do not give up because healing is possible.
When you hit rock bottom, there's only one way to go.
Yeah. Yeah, I feel that. I think there's a lot of people who, different details, but there's some similarities between everyone's stories and our own. And when you're left with nothing and that desperation, you turn inward, you find it, and you start clawing your way back out. So
right.
That hope is so important for people who are going through this, because it's sometimes 2 steps forward and 1 step back. And that can be hard, to understand.
Definitely.
Right. And to address the brain surgery question, again, they make it seem like it's so simple and that it's the thing to do and it's the right thing to do and that you'll be better. While, like AJ pointed out, they're not going to guarantee that the seizures are going to stop. But in our situation, they made it seem like the seizures are very spot specific. We know where they're taking place. At the time, he had not had a grand mal seizure, which is the whole entire brain misfiring and seizing, throwing off, electrical fires. It was very spot specific. And so, right, like they talk it all up like, oh, this is so simple. Like, why are you hesitant? What is the big deal? Is kind of, we had one doctor tell us, and this was a doctor that we highly respected. He was not a neurologist, but we highly respected this gentleman. He teaches surgery, and in a prominent medical school here in Louisiana. Again, like we felt like this gentleman there was no reason for us to question him. Well, he proceeds to tell us, when we tell him like the significance of, like, we need help through this journey, like we need some answers because they're proposing brain surgery. He says, oh, well, it's not that big of a deal. Like, we only really use about 10% of our brains.
Looking back, it's almost laughable.
Yeah.
I mean, I guess that's all you can do, or you break down and cry or drive yourself crazy at the craziness of it all. But I mean, it's right. You kind of step away and you laugh. And most certainly you definitely thank the Lord that you did question, you didn't like just heed and go with the thing. And that's what I tell people as part of our journey, that just that in and of itself was uncharacteristic of us, because as I shared, I have a medical background. My mom is a nurse. My grandmother is a nurse. I have lots of aunts who are nurses. Like, we're not anti-medical, and we weren't then. But for whatever reason, just something inside of us would not allow us to go through with the surgery. And I'm definitely grateful that we didn't.
Yeah, I think, and when we had talked prior to filming this, something that I think a lot of people relate to, and I did, is I was raised, you don't question the doctor, that they're the expert, and that would somehow be disrespectful. And I think the message here isn't that, they don't know what they're doing, they do, and most of them mean well, but to ask questions and to be part of the conversation. It's your health and your body. And the fact, AJ, they wanted to remove part of your brain, that is a massive surgery, not without a lot of other risks, not to mention, to your point, right, it wasn't going to solve it. And I appreciate that you can kind of snicker or laugh a little bit about that doctor's response. Well, you only use 10% of your brain, because the absurdity around this, and then we're going to get to this, finding the answers and the solution that didn't require this level of surgery and all of these steps. That there are, and I'm sure for some people with seizures, those are valid and the right treatment. And I think the message here is, though, that we need to be looking at, many causes and asking about things like our environment that isn't part of the standard protocol. So
why does the medical industry not look at that?
Yeah, sure.
Why do they completely overlook it?
Well, in two things, this is what we share with everybody when we share our story. There was two driving forces that stopped us from having that surgery. And one was, they couldn't tell us why this was happening. So again, to AJ's point, the root cause, again, he didn't have a head injury, and there was nothing on the MRI that showed a tumor and or a lesion. And he wasn't born with this. So we wanted to know why all of a sudden at 30 some odd years old that this started happening. They could not answer that. And they also could not tell us that once we have the surgery, that it will stop. So it was until we got answers to those two questions, we didn't feel comfortable moving forward.
Yeah. So Dr. Joe, he ends up identifying mold as a factor. He gets you started on a treatment protocol. You get a little worse before you get better, but you start making headway here and improving. Where, AJ, do you guys know where your mold exposure was? It purely from your job? Was it in your home? Was it a combination of the two? Did you find a specific exposure source? that you can
So
pinpoint?
it was a combination of everything. So being in HVAC for 24 years now, I always tell people, ask me how many units I've opened up and worked on that has no level of microbial growth. None. There's none. Every single system, with the exception of a brand new system or a fairly new system, has some level of microbial growth in it. And it should not be that way. So every single system I've worked on throughout my 24-year career has some level of mold in it or microbial growth. So that being said, I was exposed day in, day out, not only exposed from like simple repairs or maintenance. When we're replacing systems, we're in there tearing this stuff out. I mean, I would almost say with violence and kicking this stuff up in the air, and we're working with complete disregard to our own health. We're in extreme environments. We're just tearing this stuff out, knowing that it's full of microbial growth, but like completely ignorant to possible health implications of it. And then fast forward, as we get deeper and deeper and deeper into it, not only did I have microbial growth in my own system that I did take care of after I was kind of out of the field a little bit, we had some building science principles brought to our attention. We had, and it's a long story. Once again, I'll have to revert that story back to my wife. She's my sidekick here, and she remembers all the details. We had a typical knee wall assembly in our home that wasn't assembled properly, like you typically see in the industry. And we had microbial growth on the backside of the knee wall that I was aware of when I was replacing my own system, because I kind of knocked a piece of insulation down while I was in that process. And I remember noticing the microbial growth, but I was still in that same pre-building science mindset, like that's normal, just throw the insulation back up and forget about it. So yeah, we had it in our own home, not only in our AC system, but in an improperly assembled knee wall.
And we're going to spend some time. We're going to go there. I want to talk about the industry, the HVAC industry, and what you guys are pushing for and the change that's needed there. Because believe it or not, I still run into IEPs, indoor environmental professionals, and others who believe that an HVAC system in your home or another means of heating and cooling, there are others, right, can't possibly be sources of microbial growth and contribute to your health symptoms. And so I want to talk about that. But let's kind of wrap up the treatment part with Dr. Joe, and anything else you want to add. And I am curious, was anyone else in the home experiencing symptoms?
So, unfortunately, we probably can't give a completely 100% like we know for a fact answer to that. So I personally feel like, well, here's the thing. Our daughter, we have a daughter, a 14-year-old. She's been born and raised in this house. We moved in when she was less than 2 months old. She had some allergy stuff, but her and I never had mold testing done at all. Again, AJ's symptoms was so significant, really the sole focus was on him. But yeah, I mean, have I had some like focus issues since we've lived in this house? Again, Maylee had the allergy stuff take place. I'm sure if we dug into it, we probably, would have some traces. Again, just because of the nature of where we live. Also, we had it in our house. Again, different mindset back then, went through the treatment that you go through, tonsils removed, allergy medication, all that kind of stuff. Thankfully, we don't have to deal with any of that anymore. So I often, some people argue with me on this point, but I often like to say, when we know better, we do better. And AJ and I talked about this yesterday, and I said, well, the expectation is when we know better, we should do better. And we have tried to make that a point in our family. So, making strides for indoor air quality improvement. And then, right, like when we do have a symptom that could be linked and connected, investigating that, and then taking, a more natural, holistic approach to solving that. And then again, right, 100% awareness of our environments. And I will say, since going through this journey, we don't accept being exposed in public places within certain limitations. So for example, if AJ goes into a restaurant or our local kind of box home store, you know, home goods store, like AJ will walk in if he observes something, if he can visibly see something, and or he'll immediately get a headache. He doesn't stay in. He exits the building. Sometimes we stay, our daughter and I stay, but sometimes we don't. She's a lot like her dad. She has a mechanical mind. She's able to identify these things, her sense of smell. And so, right, like we don't expose ourselves. One thing that AJ felt like when he was sick, something that he could give back to the community, and it just gave him something to do, take his mind off of the trenches that we were in. So anytime we went anywhere, being an HVAC professional, he does always look up and look at the HVAC system. We have a lot of drop ceiling scenarios in our, state and in our area and community, like not a lot of exposed ductwork, those types of things, like exposed mechanicals. So we'll see spots on drop ceilings, those types of scenarios. He would take photographs and then he would exit the building and then he would leave a Google review. So we've actually been, he did that to Cracker Barrel. There's probably about 2 or 3 Cracker Barrels. We live close to an interstate. So he did that to multiple Cracker Barrels, and their corporate actually reached out to us. Some local grocery stores have reached out to us. Unfortunately, I have to say, like medical facilities, we see this in as well. So again, he tries to leave a review, and we've actually found out after the fact that he has a little bit of the mold community following. So they actually go on and try to find his Google reviews to see places that are safe for them to go in or not.
I appreciate that, AJ and Becky, for everything that you're going through to try to make change, because like you, my kids tease me. I can't walk into a place now, and sometimes I'll stop and take pictures and they just roll their eyes like, Mom, come on, get over it. But you guys, the reason I ask is I think one of the challenges in identifying mold-related illness or any kind of environmentally acquired illness is it can impact people differently. And,
Right.
For a lot of families too, the attention goes to the sickest person in the family. And in this case, it was AJ. So AJ, I'm curious, how are you feeling now? How are your symptoms? Are you seizure free? What did the light at the end of the tunnel look like for you?
So praise the Lord, I am now just over 3 years seizure free. No real significant neurological symptoms. That's all pretty much behind me. The only thing that I feel like I suffer with is memory. Obviously, while I was in the trenches, my brain was obviously not functioning properly, so my memory's still impacted from that. Otherwise, I've been pretty good besides the stress of trying to change a industry that is pretty stuck where they are.
Yeah,
They refuse to change.
Let's pivot to that, because I have often said that the remediation industry is like the Wild West, but the only industry that is probably somehow more challenging would be the HVAC industry. And so that's actually, for those listening, Becky and AJ got on our radar because I had talked to one of our co-founders, Brandon Chapa, and I said, I'm on the hunt for someone with an HVAC background who really gets what's going on here. And he said, well, you have to meet this couple that I recently met. And I'm so glad we did. So let's talk about the HVAC industry, because you said several things earlier. You said that 100% of the systems, unless they were new, that you open in the South have microbial growth. And that, like many, myself at one point, that, insulation falls down, you see microbial, that's normal. We have normalized this. So talk to us a bit about the HVAC industry. Is there training? Is there acceptance? What is the state, and what would you like to see change?
I think it's normalized, like you said. It's part of the daily grind, if you will. Working as a HVAC tech, if you will, like you're running and gunning, like you're working in extreme environments. Some of the attics that I've worked in is 150, 160 degrees. When you open up a system and you see microbial growth, like close it back, do what you got to do, close it back up, because I got 4 other calls to run and I'm running and gunning, so that's kind of the last thing on the radar. The main focus is get this thing back up and running because I got other stuff to do, and then the ignorance to it, like you don't know any better. There's no training or anything to say, hey, this could potentially impact the people's health that's living in this house.
So is it
So
the
you
way,
open it up and it's normal.
so is it the way we're designing systems? Is it the way we're maintaining systems?
The lack of. I think the biggest issue, I always say the biggest issue is quality of execution. There is very, very little design work done in the industry. I feel like the kind of crowd that I'm in now is a little bit more elite type of contractors. So I see more and more people doing it, attempting to do it. But your average kind of, I'm going to call them a big box HVAC company that's all they do is focus on that box. And it's their job to sell, sell, sell. It's all about the bottom line. They're not doing design work. They're not doing a quality execution. They're not doing proper maintenance. It's their job to go in and sell stuff. And when that's your main focus, to sell, like you don't care about solving problems. You want to sell a box.
Yeah. Yeah, I will, just to jump in for a second. We had to replace our HVAC system last summer in the middle of a heat wave in Virginia. And we were down for 9 days without air. So I'm panicking, bringing in extra dehumidifiers and fans to keep the humidity down. And I remember during this time, even with everything that I know, pressing the HVAC companies. I was like, all right, I'm concerned about the system being off because the system had froze. And then and then all that water we turned off the system, fell down, and now it's in this 90-degree house. Like I was like, this is in dark, stagnant air. This is a recipe. Oh, you don't need to worry about that. I probably asked 3 times, and each time I asked, they tried to sell me a UV light. You're concerned about mold? I got this UV light that you can have for $1,000. It's going to zap everything out of the air. Now I know enough about that technology to know that a mold spore moving through my HVAC system is moving too fast. There's not enough dwell time for that light to impact the mold spore that happens to go through my air. But I felt the pressure. I can only imagine, and I know more than the average consumer. So had I not known that, I would have caved. I would have spent another $1,000 on a UV light that wasn't going to solve my problem. And I actually had to push them to replace certain parts because they were like, oh, it'll be fine and it'll dry out. I was like, no, it's been wet for 9 days, that insulation inside that part of the unit. And they looked at me like I was crazy. And as he pulled it out, he's like, no, you were right. There was some microbial growth starting to grow. And I was like, well, yeah, this is basic science, folks. But I was looked at like the hysterical, needy woman who was freaking over a little mold. Okay, so what else do you want to say about the HVAC industry? Because when we met, you even told me before you got sick, you guys prided yourselves. You did go a step above the average box and did good work. Yeah.
So that is something that when I had an initial meeting with Brandon because I discovered Change the Air, and I read a story on you guys' website, and it was very similar to AJ's with the seizures. And it just moved me because, to Brandon's point, he said, we would like to think that our stories are unique and rare, but unfortunately they're not. So through my introduction with Brandon, I feel like he asked an important question, or one that had never been asked to me. Was he said, like, and to AJ's point, there was an acceptable level of microbial growth within an HVAC system prior to this journey that we've been on. And again, there was no connection that the mold could be connected to his poor health and that the mold shouldn't be there. So AJ, oftentimes he shares with people that, again, like when he would be diagnosing a system, there was a level of acceptance or there was a level of, oh my gosh, like this thing looks like it's about to jump out and grab me. Like I got to condemn it. We got to change it. But again, now that we know what we know, so we know we know more now. We know better now. We're doing a lot better. And there's no level of acceptable growth now in our eyes.
I don't like it. I don't want it. I don't care which species it is. Obviously, if we have microbial growth in the systems, there's an issue. There's an underlying issue. That's a symptom. Let's get to the root cause of it and figure out what's wrong. One of the biggest issues, the biggest being quality of execution. Design work, these systems need to be engineered. We have to follow certain guidelines to size the system. We have to match the system to the house. We have to match the ductwork to deliver the capacity to the room based on the design of the house. People don't do it. Once that's done, we can do a bomber design, do it to the T, but if we go in and install this system like crap, you just negated everything that you just done. And then take it a step further. We can do a proper design, a bomber design. We can do a bomber installation, but if we don't commission it, balance it, and verify it, then we just negated the first two. And then let's take it a step further. All of that stuff has to be maintained. If we, with the building science mindset now, I try to tell my clients, you hire me to come in and solve problems. It is my job to take control of the air in your home. And then I have to maintain that control. If I just take control via mechanicals, via envelope, sealing, whatever it may be, and I just leave it and forget about it, we could potentially cause a worse problem than what we started with, because the house doesn't have the massive energy exchange to deal with the moisture on its own.
Yeah, this and we can maybe talk about that too. That the house, we really need to, like the same way we approach your body, this functional, holistic, these systems working together instead of individual components. Your house is the same thing. Your HVAC, your building envelope, all those systems working together, and it makes a huge difference.
And the HVAC contractors, they focus on the box, the AC box. And I was there. I did it. I was a hack too, you know. I focused on that box, and people don't understand that box dictates a lot of what happens in that house. And take that a step further, like you mentioned, it's all systems that have to work together. If we can do a bomber HVAC system in a crappy house and not address the envelope or pressure differentials or anything like that, then our system, it's a great system, but it's not going to do anything to help the house or the people that live in it. You're gonna potentially cause issues with the new system that we just And it's our job as HVAC contractors to have this in the back of our mind. We don't have to know it like a building science practitioner might know it, but they need to have it in the back of their mind so they can recognize the problem, the symptom, recognize the potential problem to call in, hey, let's get AJ over here or another building science practitioner over here, and let's figure out what's causing it. Let's get to the root cause of the problem and address the root cause instead of just throw a bigger unit in it or throw a bigger duct at it or throw a UV light in it. Let's get to the root cause and fix the problem.
Yeah, doing these things wrong not only impacts, their checkbook and whatever else, it can make people sick. And I think that's not something people realize. They're there for a few hours. God bless them. Those attics get hot and crawl spaces, and then they're gone. And you're the one, the homeowner, the renter that's left with that. Dr. Joseph Allen has a great quote, and he says, and I'm paraphrasing here, that the person who manages your building has a greater impact on your health than your doctor.
No doubt.
And I think he is absolutely right. So, I know we're getting a little low on time here. I'm wondering, and you guys kind of touched on this, but looking back, what do you wish you would have done differently? Is there anything else you kind of want to add to that? I know you touched on it already.
I would have went into a different field. I probably would have stayed in school a little bit longer.
Yeah. But The fact you're here means that you are using what happened to you to change industry practices and make things better. And I know everyone listening, don't worry, I've already asked AJ and Becky to come back, and we're going to actually maybe do another interview talking about your HVAC system, teaching you a little bit more about it, things that you can do, because there's nobody teaches you this generally when you own a home, how to take care of it, how to maintain that HVAC system, questions to ask. So I love that you guys were open to doing kind of a follow-up, because I want to dig into that for people. But Becky, go ahead. I'm sorry, I cut you off.
No, it's fine. I mean, again, when you have the perspective that we have in terms of, we know that the journey that we went through, and look, there's no sugarcoating it. It was a season of suffering. It was a journey of suffering. As human beings, to be able to make that palatable, to be able to kind of process that in a positive manner in our minds, so we don't, spiral into depression or whatever. You have to have the mindset that it was for a reason. So now, again, we've raised a daughter who is 14 now. We're still continuing to raise her. We've had careers. We do have some education background, but personally speaking, I feel like for the first time in my life that I actually do have a significant calling. AJ and I now are very much advocates for changing the industry, for standing in the gap and helping people who are in the trenches right now and they feel like they can't go anymore. Just a simple thing to say, like, we can empathize with you. I mean, I know that it's hard. Like, I know that the timing for healing has to be now. I can cry with you. You know what I'm saying? Like, those things go a long way. But ultimately, like, we want to make a significant impact, not only in our community, but across the whole United States in terms of building better buildings and getting people to recognize that, to your point, that our built environment, I tell people it does one of two things. It's either going to fuel health or it's going to fuel illness. So, when you look at it that way, you think, okay, well, we really couldn't have or won't change anything. But ultimately, I mean, I feel like if practically speaking, if I'm going to give advice to someone who's in a journey and they, need to find out, like, what is the one thing you would do differently? I feel like first and foremost, maybe you somewhat shooting at fish in a barrel, grabbing at straws, because again, when you set up with a doctor, you've invested thousands upon thousands of dollars and you see just a little improvement to none, you want to go on to the next thing because, right, you desire to get well so quickly. So just kind of lay low, you know what I'm saying? Find somebody that you can trust, that you work with, and walk through the process with them. You do have to constantly question. You have to be your own advocate. But right, I mean, it's not always wise to, hey, like, I know this guy over here who does this, and you go, invest in it.
You end up chasing your own tail.
Yeah. So unfortunately, we did that a couple of times. But, so maybe those are the things that we would do differently. Again, just kind of trust the process, and it is a process. Yeah. Find another thing, and I think this is really, really, really important. We didn't ask for help. We kind of stuck it out on our own. I isolated us in a sense. In my mind, it was to protect AJ. I didn't want his mom to see him have a seizure. I didn't want our daughter to see those things. So I isolated us. We went to church, we went to the grocery, we went in our car. That was kind of AJ's safe places. But again, the interactions outside of our home were very rapid because I never knew when he was going to have a seizure. So those are the things that I encourage people, like, don't be embarrassed, don't be ashamed. When you need help, ask for help and find the people. If the first people don't want to help you, find somebody who will, because you can. You can find people who are willing to help you. As mold people know, they are abandoned a lot of times, by their loved ones, the people who are closest to them, who should be showing up for them. If that happens, find the next crowd, find the next person who's going to stand there for you, because they do exist. Now that AJ and I have put ourselves out there and we are willing to be vulnerable and share our stories, I mean, I have had countless upon countless of conversations with women where you think it's about housing or you think it's about HVAC systems when it's not. It's about, you know, sharing your story, saying, I've been there. Can I pray for you? Don't give up. Like, I want to give you a word of encouragement, and don't give up. Have hope. Continue to walk in faith. So that's I feel like that's a big one, that don't isolate yourself to the best of your ability, obviously, and do ask for help. I think those are two things that maybe I would do different.
Yeah, you touch on so many important like themes there, and something I'll just kind of reiterate, that in your journey, and I know in my journey, we made mistakes, and everyone makes mistakes, and to give yourself some grace, because you can get hung up, oh, I spent too much time with that doctor, or I didn't, you know, I should have. When I look back, for me, I should have made different choices, but that isn't fair to do to myself, because we did the best with the information that we had at the time. And so I know that's one of the things that you guys are doing. One of the things we're doing at Change the Air Foundation is we're trying to get people the right information, right? So that we can shorten their journey, you know, prevent some of these things from happening in the first place.
Right.
So and I know you kind of alluded to this, and what does the future look like for your family? Because Becky, you've gone back to school for this. Like, let's end on this positive note, because you guys are a force, and you're planning to do some great things, and you are doing these great things. So what does the future look like?
So countdown, less than 35 days for myself to graduation. So through this journey, literally in about, it felt like, I guess, probably less than 30 days after AJ had his last seizure, April of 2021, God told me it was time to go back to school. I had heard about a program at Tulane University. It's a master's in sustainable real estate development. So at the time, it didn't mean anything to me, but now it means a lot to me. So I had the opportunity to go back to school, complete my bachelor's degree in health and wellness. And again, in less than 35 days, I will walk across the stage with a master's degree in sustainable real estate development. So the future looks bright, I feel like. It looks also very unknown. Again, this is a journey that we're navigating kind of day by day, hour by hour, month by month. What our kind of end goal, like significant, huge goals are for the, you know, future is, advocating for better building practices and standards in our state. And, you know, if that looks like going to other states as well, we're open to that. But we definitely need to see some improvement here in the state of Louisiana with building better buildings, with recognition that, again, our built environments do one of two things: they fuel health or they fuel illness. So ultimately, we want, as a couple and as a family, we want to be able to provide healthy housing for people who find themselves in journey like we were in. We didn't have a bulk water intrusion in our home, so we didn't have visible mold growth. It was due to a construction flaw. I tell people, if Maylee and I were in the house by ourselves, that mold would still be there, because again, we weren't impacted like AJ was. So Dr. Joe constantly questioned us about our house. Finally, we got answers after months and months and months. But ultimately, we had no place to go. We couldn't go stay in a hotel. We couldn't go rent another home. And so we want to be able to provide a solution for that. And we want to be able to offer, you know, short-term healing homes to people, and potentially long-term as well. And then AJ does have his general contracting license now. So he always tells people he's itching to build houses. So we haven't been able to complete our first project yet, but we feel like it's really coming close, hopefully by the end of the year. And so, yeah, I mean, we want to build and be able to offer people safe, healing, healthy environments.
Instead of talking and saying it can be better, let me show you.
Yeah.
Come and see.
I absolutely love that.
That's my goal. I want to start building houses. I already do systems that can be an inspiration to other people if they want to recognize it and change their ways. I'm making impacts on clients' houses, but I want to be able to control the entire house, control the entire project, and show people that it is possible, and come and see. Let me show you.
Yeah.
And as you know, I mean, since research is a part of Change the Air's mission, we need scientific proof. We need to be building some data that being in a controlled environment, being in a house that checks off all the boxes that it's going to fuel health, we need the data that it's doing just that.
Funding.
Yeah.
Funding, that sort of stuff, because the medical industry doesn't want to hear it because they don't make any money on it. And the government don't want to invest in it because there's not enough people screaming for it, I guess.
Yeah.
And to that, I always say they haven't met Becky and AJ Callegan yet.
Yeah. Well, guys, I can't thank you both enough for being here, for sharing your story, for shining a light. I mean, you went from, being recommended to have brain surgery to changing an industry. And we are excited to watch you as you do that and walk alongside you guys as you do your work. Now, you mentioned clients and things like that. If people in Louisiana are in your area and they have follow-up questions or whatever, how can they get into contact with you? Are you currently taking clients or?
Please, 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 I am here to help. I am an advocate. I feel like it is my duty, my calling to help people navigate this process that really very, very few people know, much less have the personal testimony that I have and the experience I have to lead people through it in the right direction and give them the answers that they really need. It's not always what they want, but it's what they need. Please feel free to reach out to me, email, phone, whatever it takes to get to me. And I am an advocate for you. I'll fight for you.
Do you have a website or an email address that we can link in the show notes?
I do not have a current website up simply because it's not high on my radar. I have
You're busy.
my phone's ringing off the hook, but my phone number 504-248-0186, or my email is aj@accbp.com.
And you can link those things as well. And that, as soon as I graduate, that is high on our priority list to get that website active. We have an address, we just got to get it live.
Trust me, I get it. Building a foundation, there's so much work and life and everything else. So I'm excited. I'm excited for that. And we'll be sure to link to that for people. Thank you both so much.
One thing that I want to throw in there real quick. I am not all knowing. I am a dumb blue collar high school dropout. My educations came from the trenches. I am not all knowing. I see things every day that I scratch my head and wonder, what the hell is this? What am I? But I have a team of colleagues that I can call on. There are some extremely smart people in our industry that I have access to, and I have no problem calling and bugging the hell out of them. And they're there, but we need to be able to know who to call to get to those guys.
Yeah, connecting people with the right resources, the right information at the right
Exactly.
time. That might I love that, absolutely. For everyone listening, do me a favor. If you found this helpful, if you're watching on Facebook, hit like and share. If you're watching on YouTube, subscribe. Share this in a health group, in a mold group, in a food allergy group, in a seizure group. Help us shine the light on the hidden epidemic of poor indoor air quality. And while you're at it, head on over to changetheairfoundation.org. Sign up for our newsletter, because it really is the best way to get interviews like this and other resources directly to your inbox. We'll see you next time. Thanks so much.